Because I'm only hearing you say big buses on the shuttle idea.
I'm not sure. I don't know how this helps.
Was that part of your thinking?
That wasn't part of my thinking.
Was that brought up in the conversation with the PALS group?
No.
So there was no attention given to the special needs population. So would special needs students still be just in the ideas that you discussed, would they still be doing the first period so early? I'm thinking of
there wasn't any discussion
that
about special ed or basic ed. It was just sort of a conceptual idea that was discussed. So there was no details discussed as far as what type of students, what type of programs, or any specific details.
Do you think that if I went ahead and made a motion to adopt this for 2015, that I'm sure you could make it happen?
I'm sure we could make anything happen, but as I've shared with Larry and the board, sort of where we're at from a timeline, we're trying to get everything done by June. So we've already collected information from schools regarding master schedules. We've already collected special programs. We're starting to put routes together. It's part of what we're trying to do as we look at how many buses we'll need, how many drivers we'll need, and then how do we tie all this together.
So last year with the AAP, and then I think we extended the EAP testing. We had 2 testing dates, so normally we know that by November, but I know we tested other students later. And with the AAP, I don't think that we knew, did we know by this time last year that we were actually going to have AAP?
We did. We knew we were going to have AAP.
We were just putting it together around this time.
We had decided on the sites. We were still in the student selection process.
So based on that, aren't we still within the time frame to do a shuttle if we kind of modeled it after the EAP and after the AAP?
As long as we know the locations. I mean, that's going to be the key, I think, is where do you stop along? So what stops do we
We had to figure that out with the AAP last year, right?
Yeah,
we weren't doing that with the junior high.
Well, it was really more about, I believe the stops was identified based on where we could get buses in. So as we looked at AAP and EAP pickup like shuttles, it was looking at some type of central area, 1 school or 2 schools that we knew we could get into that site.
So we could do that same thing with the shuttle? Look at it the same way that we're looking at this?
Can I ask a clarifying question though? So parents still drive their kids to that shuttle location, correct? Because
Yes.
in a lot of instances, they're not within walking distance of the children's home.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, it's your community park and ride.
Right.
So
Could we utilize the smaller, I don't know the letter, could we utilize the smaller buses for the shuttle? The B buses?
you could. I think it depends on how many riders you have. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's going to be determined based on riders.
And so special needs students could be serviced then?
Potentially.
Potentially. Okay. I would certainly like that to be part of the thought process if that's what we're moving forward on.
As long as we understand what the requirements are based on the severity of the student's special needs. So some special needs are wheelchairs, some that special needs have specific requirements.
And if you, well, you know where they live, correct?
As soon as we can get the list.
If
So as soon
there
as
was-
the
right.
master list is generated,
Right.
then typically what
Then
we'll
you
probably
would know.
do is contact the students.
And it's the challenge of not having all the people in the room to talk, because I mean, with respect to special needs students, there are specific requirements of their IEPs that, aside from what transportation may or may not be able to do, their program may dictate a certain schedule based on our ability to deliver the services that are assured in the student's IEP. So I think Ryan's kind of out of his league a little bit in you know, you can respond operationally to a question that's got some other ramifications to it.
Okay.
Not to be disrespectful to you.
Not at all.
Hi,
And Ryan,
Lee.
do we already have the buses that would be required for this?
Well, I think one of the things that we suggested is as soon as we could understand what the number of students would be moving, we could model something and either take a look at some incremental costs that would take to provide that. You know, if it's 6 buses, I'm sure we could look at 6 buses. If it's more than 6 buses, then it becomes a challenge.
And we can only, it sounds to me like we're not going to fully expand 7th period anyway. We can only go to, from what I'm hearing, is that there's a constraint on how many 7th period courses we are going to be able to offer next year, or so potentially 10. How many of those kids are going to choose to be late start unless we only open it, and this won't work at Inglemoor, but unless we only open it at Bothell and Woodinville initially for late start and then backfill those classes with any kids that wanted to take it. And I'm just throwing that out there. We might get a better do you hear what I'm saying? Like, kind of like if I'm a full day or half day kindergarten, I get in a lottery, the first people that get into the 7th period classes at Inglemoor and Bothell would be the kids that want to start late.
I would ask we not think of it that way, because I know plenty of kids who need the 7th period at Woodinville, even without
So you guys are
IB.
looking at it twofold, because I'm looking at it. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
not
fine.
just for late
That's
start, but for kids who need that PE. I know someone who actually took EP, US History online, because she couldn't fit it in her schedule. Like, there's plenty of folks that.
So then we're not going to have 300 kids at each school, I guess is my point. Not every student, we know at Inglemoor that's not going to happen because they need the 7 periods. If we were to potentially offer 300 at Woodinville and 300 at Bothell, we know it's not going to be 100% of those kids. So it gives us some kind of parameter to be able to kind of figure the numbers out. I mean, I'm not, loosely is what I'm saying.
So kind of to just summarize what I would recommend is that for 2015-16, we move forward with the registration process, gather the data around interest in 7th period, interest in 2 through 7 options, and we look at whatever kind of incremental gains we can make in adding 7th period options for next year that don't, as we have now, don't include a transportation component. We assemble the task force. The task force, as a first order of business this fall, looks at the potential for incorporating shuttles around 2 through 7 options as one of the steps for 2016-17. When we also, I would hope we would also be able to take some further steps forward in increasing the number of 7th period options. I'm concerned about committing to something for next fall around these shuttles that I'm not certain we know enough right now to be able to pull off. Again, this is the newest idea of any of the ideas we've been banding about for a long period of time. So that's of concern to me. I think for 2015-16, the decision point we have is if we want to make some forward progress, I think we need to consider shifting the system. And
So I have a question then about the flip of high school and junior high start times. So if we're real fuzzy on the shuttles, which, and I'm concerned about a special needs population then that, gosh, gets to keep going at Lord awful time while other kids can take advantage of a later time. While I really appreciate the shuttle idea and liked it a lot, I think that there's a problem with that in terms of accessibility for our special needs students. So flipping the high school and junior high start time appeared to have not a huge monetary impact and looked to me like a viable option. And just because this spreadsheet is a number of pages long and I have to flip around a lot, it was not clear to me why I keep seeing music people up at the microphone. I'm not seeing that taken out of any of these schedules. So I'm really confused about where the messaging is coming that we're doing away with before school music program, although I know that there's conversation about fitting it into a regular schedule for the elementary at some point. I'm just wondering why I keep hearing when I'm not seeing that being cut. Is there something I'm missing in the spreadsheet that says before school music program is cut? Because I keep saying that it's continued, and it is. I see a little plus sign, and it says continue to provide transportation for music program in the plan that I just brought up. So what, are the other plans lacking that?
I don't know that how closely those music advocates may be paying attention to the specifics of the plans. I think in general what they're concerned about is that if we were to rush to do something dramatic to move the high school start time significantly before 2017, it may involve needing to make some different choices about how we do the elementary band and orchestra program now. And they're simply asking that there be more thought and time invested before we would make any kind of changes that might impact them. I don't think they're paying specific attention to the details of these various plans.
And I will also say,
Christensen heads up the music program, so I'm just, is he not being talked to?
I will also say that people who have written to the board about music, I have responded by saying that the board is very supportive of North Shore music programs. You've seen the responses in your board briefing. If you haven't, you will this coming Friday. But there isn't a message coming out from the board, me as spokesperson for the board, that says that the program is at risk. But I do think that when we start talking about moving pieces, that there is a natural concern about whether their piece will be impacted.
To clarify, in the grade reconfiguration task force, the potential in 2017 to impact the music program is there. That has nothing to do with Lake Start.
Correct.
To put it into the school day. I want to be really clear about that, because I think those messages are getting mixed. I'm not saying anyone here is mixing them up, but I think they might be hearing things over there and then they're putting it with Lake Start potentially.
No, they're not. Their understanding of the grade reconfiguration is that they have time to plan for what the music program will look like and an opportunity for community input in terms of the value of that. And I think what I have been hearing from not only music but elementary school parents, and why I push so hard on the task force, is the process that we're using right now lacks an opportunity for community to weigh in on what they value and how they want this to look. And that's the concern, and that's why until we can say music is protected or this falls off the table, you're going to keep hearing from anybody that believes they could potentially be negatively impacted without an opportunity to weigh in, such as in the task force.
That's why I think we just do the shuttle like we're doing AAP and EAP, and that resolves all those issues, with the exception of, I understand, special education, and I'm not minimizing that. There's that piece there that needs to be looked at. But I mean, we're already doing this. And so, how many students do we shuttle for EAP and AAP? Total, between both programs, approximately?
No idea.
200, 300, I mean, is there a way to figure that number out?
I can get you that number tomorrow.
I mean, it'd be to try and compare what we're talking about. If we have a limited amount of 7th period classes, you know, if we're already doing it, what scale is that on?
Again, I just want to harken back to, I think, the comments I made at the last meeting, which is this is probably the worst place to be trying to do operational and tactical level work, which is what this is. And I believe that it really is important to get the task force assembled so that all the voices are sitting around the table, so that as the operational and tactical work is taking place, all of those influences and interests are being represented. And I just, whatever gets done at this level is not going to be fully inclusive, and we're probably the least equipped people to be trying to make these types of decisions at the level we're trying to make them in this process, this setting.
So I just have one last question. When we did AAP and EAP, Did we have a task force to figure out how to put the shuttle together last year?
Those are basic ed required programs, so we did an assembly task force.
It's not basic ed, my understanding is to take people to other schools, it's only basic ed to required in your home school. So we're making the choice to take people to other schools, correct?
We made the choice to run the programs those ways, yes.
Right, so we're making the choice to shuttle kids, and did we have a task force on putting that shuttle route together?
There was no implication that anything else was going to be negatively impacted.
No, I'm not saying negatively impact anything. I'm saying, he said there's potentially 6 buses there to run a shuttle route for the few kids that want to go to 7th period, just like we're doing it for AAP and EAP. I'm saying just model it. Do the same. No program impact, no. And I realize it's not for all kids, it's going to be limited to how many other courses we offer.
Well, which is why I kind of was interested in the flip of the high school and junior high start time as an option, because that actually does provide some substantial relief for high school students, and that would include special needs students. That would be all students that would help, correct? That's everybody.
Yes, you'd be flipping the system.
Now, that doesn't provide better transportation for 7th period, which I realize is very important, but I believe that the district has a plan and is increasing, and I do appreciate hearing about that plan and about the increase that the district has been considering along at a rate that you've already determined.
I think that flipping is potentially a really viable option. And as we've looked at some of the studies, some of the research, Kimberly, that you shared, I think we saw a number of districts that's the route that they went to achieve a later high school start time. Again, I think that kind of systemic change is the kind of thing that should be processed through the task force. Because again, I think it has broad implications for lots of stakeholder groups that you want to be sure you've got all those voices around. I think it's a really viable option.
I thought we were specifically discussing 2015. It says that, 2015, 2016. These are options. That's what it says on the form. So, and I believe we already established that 2015 was not a task force discussion.
So are you saying, Dawn, are you saying that you would like to flip those? Are you suggesting that the people who completed this survey and said that they wanted a later high school start were also saying that they wanted an earlier junior high school start?
This is an interim step. I would hope, as I've stated clearly before, that all of the secondary schools are starting later, because that's what the American Academy of Pediatrics has suggested. But as an interim step, showing good faith and to the community that we're attempting to start, you're starting junior high, I think it's 25 minutes earlier, is that correct?
Junior high starts at 8:05.
I think so, right?
Correct. It's
Okay.
45 minutes after high school.
And so I'd like that option then, and it's one of the options you've given to us. You've said it's very viable, and it's on this high school bell time options 3-tier transportation 2015-16. So I think that would be a good way to go, considering that I do have concerns about the shuttle and the special needs population not being able to receive any relief. I am constantly reminded of the story of the child who has to get up at 4 a.m. and everybody wonders why he's so exhausted at the beginning of the day. How in the world is a child who needs tube feeding having to do this, and how is that acceptable? So I like that option.
So, Kimberly, I'm going to ask you, because you seem to have more understanding. Does the change in circadian rhythm, does it not start until 14, 15 years old? Or does it start earlier?
Approximately at puberty, but that obviously is different so girls it would be a little earlier, boys it would be a little later.
So all we're doing is just trading one bad for another bad by flipping junior high.
So I think sixth graders are still developmentally everyone's going to be at a different stage.
Right.
So I can definitely do the research to find an exact time frame and I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
And get that. I think that the people that have done it on the research that I've looked at have chosen to flip middle school and elementary as not being necessarily 100% ideal, but still fitting within that pattern. And maybe by the 8th grade, they're starting to change over.
Right, but we would be doing this with our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Until we move to.
Right, so we basically have one set of teenagers flipping for another set of teenagers.
We're talking about, I think, those starting them at 7:40, correct?
But it's still.
It's not, yes.
No,
it's-
not even.
Why would they
not
start at
7:20.
7:40 and not 7:20?
No, that's what it says on here.
7:40.
It says 7:40.
It's not starting at 7:20, it's not a direct flip.
It says,
That's why-
yeah, it's not a full flip.
That's
And
why
correct,
it
Ryan?
at least gets to a
'Cause, well, no, who put
7:40
this
for one
together?
group. Ryan?
I'm sure I did, but I know we.
So it
put
says
a bunch of
7:40.
studies in it.
7:40.
Many, yeah.
Okay, and then
And-
my other clarifying question, and then can we still provide the freshman academy and kids accessing languages and math at the high school if we do this plan?
I'm gonna have to defer to the instructional folks.
Yeah. The freshman academy students would need to flip instead of going up to the high school early. I believe that they would need to start their day at junior high. If junior high would start prior to high school, they would have to then be transported up to the high school to take their 6th period class at the high school and finish their day up there.
But with a shorter time, instead of it being, what is it now, 45-minute difference, it's only a 25-minute difference.
Right, so I'd have to dig in and take a look at the different bell schedules and see what the impacts would be in working with transportation. And there's a longer time frame to turn buses in the Woodinville Leota service area, which is where we typically tend to have students later. So I need to look at each of those bell schedules and match it up.
And that's not insurmountable, correct? Does that mean that students won't be able to take their foreign language?
It means that it may need to flip instead of they would take at the end of the day.
Okay.
So then we just shift the teachers.
Okay. So to wrap this discussion for the evening, are we finished with the 7th period options and associated costs? Do we have more to talk about on that particular topic?
I'm just going to restate what I said, just so it's out there again, that we're already doing this. We did it quite rapidly last year without knowing a lot of who was going to be in these classes. And if we're looking at something that doesn't impact the system, though I'd love to go middle school, high school, but I don't think that we have the vote here to get there. So I'm trying to look for something that maybe we can all get to 2015 that least impacts the system. I mean, if it were my choice, that would be the choice I would do. But I think the shuttle, running it, we're already doing it. We started this year last year with our program, and to add several more courses, it's not going to mean everybody. That's unfortunate, but at least we get some kids. And I'm just looking at something that we can all come to consensus to and start it for 2015. And so I understand we're not going to service every high school student, which I think we should, but I understand that that's not probably where we'll all get by 2015.
So what do we have a consensus on the board that would move forward on the shuttle idea, that would not move forward on the flip that the district has given us as one of the choices?
I personally don't think we could flip without doing a formal community engagement process.
That's what I'm hearing everything.
Yeah, I don't know, I think there are implications to it, and the details we would want to really flesh out, and so I don't think we could flip without really actively engaging the community.
Just give us 6 buses and let's just shuttle the kids and be done.
Well, we managed to dismiss students 90 minutes early without involving the community. So I think that we could do this based on that it's a recommendation, one of the recommendations from the district.
So that's not entirely accurate, but
That's pretty accurate. The only thing we did was ask the community which day they wanted.
right. As you know, that was a different issue. I hear what you're saying though. So in order to move forward on this, I'm going to propose that we put an action item on our next agenda to make a decision about 2015. I think it doesn't serve anybody to keep drawing this out.
I agree.
I would really like not to have this on the agenda for the next 10 meetings. But I don't think I have articulated very well some of my thoughts around why I think 2015 is too soon to start, and I just am going to articulate some of them now so that board members have an opportunity to think about them in addition to your own thoughts in the coming weeks. But I know that the beginning of the year seems very far away, but as we have heard, planning is in process right now for students, for staff, for transportation, for everybody, and it's complicated to make major changes. I don't see I think a junior high school swap is a fine option for a task force to consider. I don't think it's something that we have the right to impose on our community without involving them in that discussion. So I also think always as part of my thinking, I'm considering the fiscal impacts, and I'm not suggesting that you're not. But I know that our property owners bear a pretty heavy burden in relationship to our other districts surrounding us. And I'm really mindful of adding, I know that on our survey, the question that made support for later start time drop dramatically was when it would cost money. So I would be reluctant to do anything that would put our regular levies and bonds at risk, because we know our need in the coming years. So that's always in my mind as I'm thinking about it. I think sometimes it can be interpreted as obstructionist. I would prefer to think of it as systems thinking, and just seeing the system impacts. So I'm looking at this legislative session. We have 1351, we have potential COLA, we have how the state chooses to add money into our system, all of which could potentially negatively impact our finances. A COLA, as you know, costs us money. 1351 would cost us money. I just don't think we have a really very good financial picture of the things that are potentially impacting us for the coming year. I think if we look at the districts that have successfully implemented later start time, one of the things that they have in common is the time and the care that they've taken with involving community members in the options and letting them weigh in on it. And I think that we have the best opportunity for success if we do the same thing, take the time to do it. We are in the midst of our incredibly major initiative of the boundary changes and the reconfiguration, and there's a lot of work that is being done for that as well. So I don't want to distract us from that work either. I just see the task force as an awesome opportunity to really vet these operational and tactical issues that we're talking about. I don't think that on the dais is either practical or the best way for us to decide what changes to implement. I think that is much better done in a task force. I also think that when we look at, we heard from Angela Kerr today, Arrowhead, Cottage Lake, Woodmore, Crystal Springs, Hollywood Hill, Lockwood, Kokanee, Shelton View, and West Hill all have a later start time right now, and moving, considering moving something later impacts those communities. In my neighborhood, Arrowhead has, butts up against there's a red light that at 4 o'clock.
Did any of us talk about moving those?
No, if we're gonna talk about 2015,
I don't think.
If those
I
are the
didn't- I
options.
didn't bring it up, and I don't know if you brought it up.
it's
Anyone
been
else?
talked about the last several meetings, so.
Okay, I thought, was it on here? I guess
It's actually on the high school and junior high flip option. It does involve moving the late.
Moving the whole
elementary.
system.
20 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that it is, in my neighborhood, the traffic gets a lot worse, even 10 minutes later, because there's a red light that you can't turn on red after 4 o'clock. And people that are driving the Woodinville Duval Road, as we've heard, Woodmore, I just think that there are a lot of high traffic areas that are hugely impacted by a shift in the system. So whether or not you're thinking about it, that's what I've heard in previous meetings. So if you're not, you can just dismiss that. But I just think that there are a lot of questions that we did not ask in the survey. We asked, do you want a later start time? And people said yes, and I am completely supportive of that. And I think that's the direction that I would like to see us go as well.
How many questions did we ask in that survey?
They involve transportation.
I was wondering.
Yeah. I don't know how many questions it were that we had, but what we didn't ask are what options that you would prefer, whether you want the system moved, or whether you want them flipped, the grade levels flipped. There are a lot of questions that we did not ask, and I just think that we need to ask them before we proceed on this. So I think I just, as I said, I think it's just impractical and inefficient for us to be talking, regurgitating this and talking about this when this is work I think could really be done well by a task force. So
I wasn't here for the night that everyone voted, although I did sign this resolution. But in it talks about the board was interested in hearing about a solution for 2015. Are you saying then that you didn't, like that whereas or therefore, and so you voted for that and you were in favor of the resolution, but you didn't ask for that change? Because what I'm hearing you saying is 2015 is a no-go. So are you saying that you don't believe that 2015, as it says in the resolution, is something that the board is going to consider?
I don't think the resolution says, I think it says, I am absolutely in favor of this resolution. It says that we will implement a later start time by no later than 2017-18, and that we will look at opportunities to do it before then. I am saying that I think 2015 is not smart to do it, for the reasons that I've articulated.
And so you're opposed to a 2015 then? I mean, no matter what we have?
I'm opposed to any major changes that impact the system in ways that we have not yet discovered or not yet talked about. Yes, I am.
But we have discovered and talked about a lot of things. So
We haven't talked about the impacts of them. I think what I've learned about from being on the board for the last 8.5 years, what I've learned is that for every decision, there's a tail on it. And we have not talked about what that tail is for many of the options. Is that clear?
I wish we'd given this much consideration to collaboration time and this much time for community to give input, this much thoughtfulness, and this much detail at the board level.
Yeah, I actually wish that we had too. I think we learned a lot from that process and from that decision. And I'm hoping that we can move beyond that and work for a resolution.
So, I'm hearing from you that, okay, fine, do other board members feel like 2015 is indeed something they're interested in hearing about?
I want to be clear that the proposal of having a few buses for the classes that we already have and potentially a few more isn't a huge impact from my understanding. So that's completely something I think different than what you're saying, Janet. So I hear what you're saying here.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely.
saying something over here, and I want to be clear that that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
I do think a task force is important, but I do think that we should follow the resolution and try to get intermediate relief somehow, some way. We're already offering 7 periods, so I would just ask that maybe for this next meeting that we have an action item that you could put together based on if we had X number of students for the classes we offer, what that would look like, or, you know, so.
Yeah, and I'm saying, I'm not opposed to that as long as there isn't anything else that's negatively impacted. If we don't have to buy new buses, if we don't have to.
Yeah, I didn't understand that this
Yeah.
said we did have to buy new buses. I
Yeah.
think that would be a different conversation, but we can only, I guess my point is we can only offer so many classes, so it's limited in capacity anyway.
So you're opposed to any option that buys new buses?
I'm opposed to any option that has not been vetted, that has a tail on it that we have not considered.
Just said new buses, so is that something that's got a tail on it?
So I'm proposing that we will put this on the agenda for a decision for what we're doing in 2015 on the action, as an action item for the next agenda. And so we can discuss it at that time.
So will we have all of these options again at the next meeting then? Is that what we're going to discuss at the next meeting again?
We're discussing a decision point for 2015, what we will do.
Can I just ask what the action item is, just to clarify?
Well, we're building that action item right now, so if you have input into that, then we can certainly.
So to Ryan's point, how can we get some information so we can get more research into the shows? What could help research in terms of, you mentioned parameters about ride times.
Sure. I think a couple things. I think we need to understand what your guidelines are, what parameter guidelines will be. So if we're using the community transit option, how long of a ride time are we looking at? I think that would be one thing. I think we need to also collect additional information about roughly how many students we're looking at. So I think one of the things, Kimberly, you said, we may need to buy some new buses. It will depend upon how many riders we have.
Well, we can, like I said, we can only have so, right now we're offering 5 courses. Potentially we're going to offer 10. It sounded to me like we couldn't go above that. Inglemoor, most of them are IB. So we have Bothell and Woodinville, but we're talking, if you're talking 600 students, it's not going to be 600 students. So it can only be a percentage of that, which sounds like 6 buses could fit that. I say we model it after the AAP and E program and just follow what we've been doing there, though I understand it's at the high schools. But
When we modeled the AAP and EAP, we had the number of students that we would be transporting.
Right.
So we knew the location, and then we worked with the program to understand the number of students we'd be transporting to determine the number of buses we need.
So when are we surveying students for their interest in 7 periods?
When do they register?
Anytime between, I think one school's next week and then up until the end of March, so the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we would have the information compiled maybe mid-April, first week of April, second week of April.
And I have been clear since the beginning, I hope, that I am in favor of a 2 through 7 option. So I'm not saying, I think we're talking about transportation now, and I don't know what's possible with transportation, whether through shuttles or whatever. But I am definitely supportive of adding that extra FTE to make that an option available for students.
I thought that was being done regardless.
I'm just saying what I said may have been misconstrued as non-support, but that's not true.
I just thought that was part of the plan.
oh, And some of those students can drive themselves too, so we're probably talking about a 600 students, maybe half or something.
So the action item is?
That's what we're building. Does anyone have a suggestion?
So I do. I would recommend to bring closure to this for 2015, that the action item list a series of options that the board can debate and decide upon for 2015. What I've heard so far is a shift of the entire K-12 system, flipping junior high and high school start times, implementing some sort of 2 through 7 shuttles as we learn more information, or no action. Are there other alternatives people would like to have on the table?
Do any of us right now want that shifting the system on there? I don't know if any of you do. I didn't hear any of us say that tonight.
I've heard complaints about the shifting the system, that it's not sufficient. And obviously we've heard testimony tonight about shifting the system. So that is why I focused on what seemed to be a low-cost, positive option. I would very much like to hear more about shuttles, and as long as, you know, it's an interim step, this is an interim step, either one is fine with me.
So am I not seeing any support for shifting the whole system? Are we taking that option off?
I didn't what you said. Did you say take it off? Because then you said
I
either
just
one
would-
is fine. So what
Either one of those, the shuttle or the ones I've addressed this evening, would be fine if you wanted to narrow it down.
Yeah, I'm completely in favor of removing, shifting the whole system. I think that there's numerous complications. Could we add just further expanding of the 7-period options without transportation?
I think if we expand 7-period options, that you start to get into an equity issue if you don't provide transportation. So it's not that I'm saying I don't want to hear that option. I would support your desire to hear that option, but I also want us to realize that there's an equity issue that goes with that I'd like to see remedied quickly as well.
Okay, I think we have our agenda item for next week.
So, for clarity, so moving the K-12 system is not an option the board wishes to consider?
Raise your hand if it is, because I haven't heard anyone say.
No, it is not.
I'm not saying not for the task force to look at, but
Right.
not for
Right.
us to decide.
For 2015, right. That is new
If
this
the
meeting.
task force were to come to that conclusion, then I'm not saying it's off the table for them, just to clarify.
And the only reason I addressed that in my comments was because this is the first meeting that it has not been an option that was being actively considered, so it's good to clarify that, thank you. All right,
I don't mind bringing it back up if we need to.
No, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Would you like it on the menu of options? You can certainly dismiss it or choose not to act on it, or at least having it on the list.
I think having the menu of options is nice. I've already said what I think is viable, so I think having it there certainly is a good idea. We already have it, so.
And I think, are we planning to do any outreach to junior high parents to alert them that that is an option that's being considered?
So can I just clarify this, because now I'm concerned what we're voting on. When we vote on this, whatever option we choose, it means everything else is off the table, right? So if it's not on the list, we're not considering it anymore. Is that what I'm understanding what we're voting on? That we're putting together a list of options? And
We're not voting.
Next
time.
week, next meeting.
If it's not on the list, then it's no longer
That's
Under
how I
consideration
understand
for
it.
Is that what everybody else is understanding? For
2015.
2015, that it's no longer an option, that we can't then if we don't like what happens, we can't then
Thank you
start
for
back
that.
all over again. Okay, good,
Well,
perfect.
that's not technically how it works, because you can.
Okay, well, then,
That's why I said, go ahead and leave them on. When Superintendent Francois said, should we perhaps have the full meal deal option, just to
Okay.
remind board members? I'm just
Okay.
saying which I think are the best options.
I just wanted to say, I was just trying to narrow it down so that when we had that, we can all say, okay, we're done with this, we're done with this, I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, I'm just saying, I didn't hear anyone bring it up today, so the ones that we all brought up seem like that's the ones we should move forward instead of giving all this time and energy to these ones that we know that, for 2015, we're not.
And that's
Right.
causing some anxiety out
right,
there too.
exactly, that's what I'm trying to
But in-
clarify as closure for the
Or you
community.
can put them all on, I mean, I get, it doesn't,
In consideration for people who might have an objection or who might have a comment on that particular item, if it is under consideration, it needs to be on the list. That's the,
Oh, I thought that that was what Superintendent Francois was suggesting. So I said, sure.
okay.
so there's 3 options on the list?
Will you read them again? Laura?
There's moving the K-12 system, flipping junior high and high schools, implementing some type of shuttle system, 2 through 7 shuttle system option, expanding 7th period options without transportation, or no action. And I guess no action and expanding 7th period options without transportation are somewhat similar.
Okay, can we move on? All right, next item on the agenda. Is policy review. First reading of board policies 9,000, 9210, 9221, 9244, 9246, and 9272. Do board members have any questions? And this will be back on the agenda for approval next time.
But was I wrong? I didn't see any modifications? Is this
No modifications
in any
whatsoever.
of them? I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
We worked hard on these last time around.
So I had some concerns about 9210. Although I know that there's no change and I've reviewed the RCW, and while I don't really have a problem with the language, what I am concerned about is that there are a number of neighbors very concerned that we're going to come take their land. And I guess I was interested in, I mean, we just had kind of an update about what the problem was. I'd like a clear understanding, because I wouldn't be in favor of just taking somebody's land forcibly. So what is your thinking along those lines?
To my knowledge, the district has never exercised that. But we do have the legal authority to do that. So I think that's why it's in the policy.
We've been very consistent in our communication with the landowners. We've been talking with adjacent to the Anderson property where I suspect the concerns are arising. That while they have been, some of the landowners have been expressing concerns about district invoking eminent domain, we have been very consistent in our response to them that we have no intention of doing so. We are trying to work with agreeable, willing selling partners. And we're trying, in the process of trying to put together some assemblages with willing, agreeable partners that are interested in selling. It's proving more problematic than we were anticipating, so we're starting to cast our eyes looking at different pieces of property elsewhere. But I would agree with Karen. The district does have the legal right as a public agency to move towards condemnation, and I think it would think the board should maintain that authority within its policy, although we're not at the present time looking to invoke that at all.
And that's all I wanted, was some reassurance that, you know, here's this policy, and I certainly heard those neighbors be concerned about that, and that I'm glad to hear that we are expanding our search options as opposed to moving forward. That's what I wanted to know, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other questions or suggestions?